Jay, welcome to the Leanpub launch video for switching to Linux, a practical guide for Windows and Mac users. I was wondering if you could take a moment to talk to all of us today a little bit about yourself and what you do and what your book is about and who it's for.
Absolutely. I'm a Linux expert and technologist, among many other things. I have a passion for technology, and basically, it's Linux has always been my primary focus and obsession, kind of. So it only made sense to get into a career. And at the beginning, being a system administrator, it was pretty standard, but I was just not satisfied with that and eventually started making content turned into the Learn Linux TV YouTube channel, which is now, as far as I know at least, the basically the most popular Linux YouTube channel on the planet. I don't know personally, at least in the English market, if anyone has more subscribers than me at this point, but I passed 1 million subscribers, almost to 1.1 million at this point, 65 million views lifetime on the channel. So it's been incredible. I have a lot of background in enterprise IT, and one of the things that I think sets the channel apart is I basically get a little annoyed with education in terms of IT because I don't feel like people are being properly prepared. And I wanted to, and this is what sets me apart, show how technology is actually used, show how Linux is actually used in the workplace. Because my goal is that if, someone watches my content and then they start a job, the reaction when they're asked to do something is like, yeah, I know that. Yeah, I could do that. Rather than, what? What is that? I've never heard of that before. For example, as far as I know, most, if not all, the college programs for system administration that I've seen don't even go over version control. They obviously that's more of a developer thing, but system administrators use it, and generally speaking, you're expected to know that on the job, but it's not part of the college curriculum. And often the content's out of date, it's hard to understand, or it's not taught well. And Linux is hard to understand in and of itself, by itself, because it's such a huge topic. You have distributions, desktop environments, several different ways, actually more than several ways of installing applications, over 200 distributions to choose from. So it's kind of just this massive topic. And since I'm so passionate about it, I just figured I would make content that I wish existed when I first started. People now they see me as an expert, but when I first started, it was hard. It took a long time to wrap my head around these concepts, banging my head against the wall, just like, why can't I understand this? Is there something wrong with me? What's going on? Some of the things that other people think too when they're first starting out, but I got to the end of it and I persevered through it and I got the knowledge and I'm proud of myself. But part of it is giving back and taking really complicated topics, making them easy to understand, talking in plain English, breaking it down into how it's actually used. And in addition to that, my attention to detail. Oh, sorry, my that's hilarious. Um, anyway, with the attention to detail and my perfectionism, it kind of turned into trying to create the best video quality that I possibly could and using special effects and making things look cutting edge because it's not like I'm in competition with anyone else. I'm not. I'm always trying to outdo myself. But at the same time, the goal is that it's not only easy to understand, but people see this content and they think it looks professional. It's well narrated since I'm a writer, which obviously we'll get into. I write every video the same way I would write a book. I have a
Mm.
narrative, I have a story. The person is starting here, and then I want to get them here, and then I want to get them there, and then by the end, I want them to get to a certain point. So I approach every video by writing a script, just as if it was like an article, the same amount of perfectionism on that. And then I turn it into a video that's easy to understand. But the as good as all that is, though, the truth, as much as I hate to say this, is that not everybody learns the same way. Meaning that not everyone is going to cater to videos when it comes to their learning style. It might be kind of hard for them to learn that way. I've had people tell me, I think your content is great, but I just really can't do the video thing. I need to read it. I need something that I could, read through. So the writing career comes from I love writing. I just absolutely adore writing. I just have a talent for it, I think. In college, I turned around a 40-page final exam in like an afternoon. I mean, writing to me has just always been something I was able to do. So I could cater to the people as well that don't necessarily they're not able to learn by video content. So that way, regardless of whether you want to read or you want to watch or both, I'll have something for someone. And now with the writing career, I decided to terminate my contract with my publisher and just go my own because I want to write directly to the people without anyone in between calling any shots or having ridiculous suggestions to the manuscript that make absolutely no sense. And then you have to argue. And it's just, I just want to write directly to the people. And, I've heard of, I think with Leanpub, for me, it was like I can use Git. I can write my book in Vim. Okay, sold.
Yeah, thanks very much for
But
sharing all of that.
yeah,
That's really great. Before we get on to the book specifically,
sure.
one thing I wanted to say is first of all, congratulations on your great success with the YouTube channel. I mean, that happens because what you do is so good, and
Thank you.
so useful to people. And I feel like somewhat confident in saying that because I see so many. My life is watching books being made by authors, a lot of programming books and a lot of like books like this is what I wish I'd known and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
yours are very good. And I can tell, it's not the best metaphor in the world, but like battle hardened, like if I'm referring to a piece of UI, like a button that you click on in the book, I put it in italics, click install.
Right.
Like I know how hard it is to be consistent and to come up with those kinds of things, but to
Yeah.
understand the importance of them for a beginner learning something really
Right.
demonstrates the kind of commitment to the craft of teaching. And also, in the context of that success that you've had on YouTube, obviously making great videos and people love them, to still be making books definitely shows that you really care about that process. Personally,
Mm.
I like when it comes to things like switching to Linux, the book that we're going to be talking about. I like books. I like to be able
Hmm.
to like a book is more like, I mean, I love videos too, right? But like the idea of like being able to like look at a page as a kind of coherent thing that I'm looking at and like pause and scratch my chin and kind of, that kind of thing that seems more conducive to learning from kind of book style things than from videos. And so it's
Hmm.
just so great to see that you've got that. So the book that we're talking about today is switching to Linux. And you already mentioned distributions and stuff like that. So you start the book talking about that, and I think it's just really great. You talk about how everybody talks about Linux as an operating system, even you do sometimes, but Linux is actually a kernel, and then there's
Right.
distributions of it. So why don't we start just very briefly, if you could talk about that? What's a distribution in the context of Linux, and if we're thinking of installing it on a computer?
Sure. The easiest, shortest explanation before I get into the longer one is that it's an operating system, or at least it exists on the same layer as one. So just like you install Windows or whatever you like, you go through the setup process, you install your apps. It's pretty much the same thing there. Obviously, using it is differently, but it is an operating system on that same layer. But when we get into the distinction, Linux is a kernel and a distribution is the operating system layer. So the kernel is effectively the brains of the operation. It's doing all the thinking. It's almost like if your operating system had a CPU, it's the kernel. But people think of Linux as an operating system because, if someone's just starting out, they don't know about that distinction, and to them, they're installing it like an operating system. It may as well be one. But the reality is, it's a kernel, and a Linux distribution is a combination of the Linux kernel with other programs, utilities, and things that make it an operating system. So you could think of the kernel as an ingredient of an operating system, and every operating system has one. Mac has one, Windows has one, they all have it. But Windows and Mac users really don't, unless they're really deep in the trenches of how the operating system is designed, they don't even like hear the word kernel because it's not like, oh, I'm using Mac. I wonder what kernel I should use with it. You just use what it comes with, what it's built on, and it's just built in, and that's how it is. But with Linux, everything is more of a component. You can swap out this piece with another piece. If you don't like the GUI, you could just, swap it out for a different one. Whereas with Windows, yeah, there's ways of theming it and there's extensions and all these add-ons, and I've seen them. I used window blinds back when I was a Windows user a very, very long time ago to skin the operating system to make it look different. But at the end of the day, it's still the Windows UI, it's the Mac UI, which is fantastic if you like that UI and it works well for you. But at the same time, you can't really swap it out for a different one. So if you don't like the Mac UI, you just don't want to use Mac at that point. You just use Windows or something else. But with Linux, you could literally swap out the entire UI with something else. You can swap out the login manager, even going down to the trenches of what's handling the audio on the back end. You could change that too. Obviously, as a beginner, someone that just wants to use it as a desktop, they're probably not really all that interested in changing out components. They might want to find a distribution that works well for them. And then when they get more advanced, maybe they'll start caring about those things. So because of the fact that we have beginners all the way up to expert, I don't really get upset like some users do when people call Linux an operating system because it exists at the same layer and it does
Hmm.
effectively the same thing. So you may as well call it that. But the reality is it's an ingredient of an operating system. But at some point, people just don't care about the distinction unless they're doing what I do or they're passionate about it. They just want to use their computer. So sometimes it's just a matter of simplifying it for them. So I don't, so I just don't correct anyone at this point when they say
Yeah,
that.
no, that totally makes sense. But having an
Yeah.
understanding of it, I love the idea of starting there with that kind of technical kind of decision, so you go or distinction, so you can go into like the book sort of actually having a kind of understanding of those things at the level that you need to with the great metaphors that you use
Hmm.
as well. It's interesting that the concept of freedom and switching. So I have a question. My question here was like, why would an ordinary computer user, like someone who uses like a PC, switch to switch to Linux? And I was reminded of an experience I had almost 20 years ago now. I'd moved to a new country, time to get a new computer. I'd been using a PC for a while, and I got a Mac. And the first thing that happened when I opened it up was there was this chime.
Hmm.
And the second thing that it did was it showed me whatever image it decided to show me on the kind of opening screen. So the first
Right.
two things I wanted to do were turn off the chime and get rid of that thing on the opening screen, and I couldn't do it. And
Right.
the next time I was in the shop where I bought that computer, I figured out some kind of hacky ways to do it, but because I was stubborn. But the next time I was in the shop where I'd bought it, uh, there was a sort of person who worked there walking around, and I said, "Oh, by the way, do you mind if I ask you a question? Why can't I turn? You can now, but at the time I was like, why can't I turn off the chime, and why can't I set a different
Right.
image when I turn on the computer?" And the guy got mad, and he said, "Why would you want to do that? That's like turning on like it's like watching Friends. You see the opening credits that the show provides you with." And I was like, man, that is not what I use a computer for.
Yeah,
And
that is
that is
so
not
true.
that's not my relationship to this machine that I use all day long.
Well, I think for me, I'll get into a personal story and then I'll tell how it appeal or how it is for other people. By 2005, I was a Linux user, but not full time. I had a Windows PC and a Linux PC. I didn't feel like I had enough knowledge at that time to use it all the way. So one day, at the time, I'm really poor back then. I don't even have an internet connection all the time. So I work really hard to buy my computer. I even bought Windows. I paid, I actually purchased it. It's not pirated or anything, even though, it's hard up. I still did that. And then one day when, my internet bill was late, I had to reactivate my computer because I was reinstalling Windows just to maybe repartition it differently. Maybe I could get more frames in the games I was playing or something like that. But then, I came time to activate it and I literally in Michigan in November had to walk down to the payphone with
Oh,
this piece of paper where I wrote down the activation code and I'm calling a 1-800 number for Microsoft to type in this activation code and then write down what it, is supposed to be. And it's November. It's cold. It's like rainy, it's icy, and I'm just like shivering in a thick coat, trying to ask Microsoft for permission to use the computer that I purchased with my hard-earned money. And to me, that was absolutely offensive. It's like, it's my computer. Why am I asking permission for this? I would totally understand if I had a computer on a payment plan that I didn't fully own yet. That's totally fine. But this is my computer. And since I was already dabbling with Linux at that point, that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And I'm like, I can't keep be beholden to another company for my computer use. So that's my story. Now, when we talk about other people's stories, you'll hear similar things. And it could be down to the most trivial things that just get annoying. For example, if you're an Apple user and you decided not to use Apple Pay, maybe you just don't want to for whatever reason, every single time you update iOS or whatever, it'll prompt you to set this up over and over again. And
yeah,
there's no cancel button or, don't remind me again. It's remind me later. It's the only
yeah.
option you have is either do it now or be reminded later. So you're going to keep getting that message and you don't have any say in it. I just brought up Windows activation, which admittedly isn't really that much of a problem now because, uh, you could use practically any activation code or product key with older Windows release, and everybody kind of does that. So it's kind of a less of an issue, but still, now you have to find workarounds to use your computer. And then, if you're an IT person working at a company, imagine you have to create a new group policy to make sure Bejeweled doesn't get installed on your employees' workstations because Microsoft decided that every computer needs to have that game installed without any way out of that. So I guess my question to a lot of people is if you really think about it, how much time are you spending fighting your operating system? I mean, sure, it only takes 10 seconds to say no thank you to Apple Pay and you go about your day. Add that 10 seconds and then add the 10 seconds here, the minute here, or you see ads on an app that didn't have them before, or you're getting ads in the start menu now. Everything is changing under your feet and you're just along for the ride when it comes to proprietary operating systems. To be fair, some people don't care, and that's totally fine. Maybe Windows or Mac is right for them, and I don't judge that. But I do challenge people to see that there's a better way without companies doing that. And also, you have computers that are end of life and aren't supported anymore. Now, to be fair, I understand that. A company can't support a product forever as much as we would like them to. But we also shouldn't throw them in a landfill just because a company decided to stop supporting it. So with Linux, we could just replace the operating system the computer came with and continue to use it longer, which actually ends up being environmentally safe because now there could be fewer computers in the landfill. We can keep using them longer. And a lot of people in my audience, it's
Right.
surprising how old their computers are, and they're
Mhm.
still working to this day. And I'm thinking it's over 10 years old, and some cases over 12 or 13 years old. And I'm like, just wow. And it's still going strong.
You reminded me of one of my favorite quotes when this kind of thing comes up. It's from Benjamin Franklin. I think he was giving a speech to like the people of like the city council or something of Philadelphia, and I think they were thinking of uh, introducing publicly provided kind of street cleaning.
Hmm.
And of course, this meant everything was very kind. Everyone knew every detail of public life in their city right at that time, and it's like, oh well, if we're going to do street cleaning, we're going to have to introduce a tax to pay for street cleaning because it's just the costs are going to go up. And so
Mhm.
he had to justify this, and he said, look, and like the streets were filthy and disease and all that kind of stuff at the time, but so from our perspective nowadays, we're like, why would we have to justify this? It seems obvious, but he did, and he said, look, I know it might seem like expensive and it might not seem that necessary, but you know, everyone who owns a shop has to go out and sweep the front stoop 3 times a day.
Mhm.
Multiply that by every shopkeeper in the city and think
Right.
about how much time our shopkeepers are spending just sweeping their stoop instead
Yeah.
of instead
Yeah.
of managing their store, talking to customers. And I think he even talked about like getting dust in your eye. Multiply that by like everybody every couple minutes all day long every day in our city, and how much productivity are we losing. And I love thinking of that example,
Hmm.
when we're thinking about these things in our day-to-day lives, just the little, and there's that sense. But in particular, I mean, I confess I'm a Mac user. I haven't switched to Linux or something like that, but the it's the what I dislike the most about being beholden is not so much the little things, it's just the fact of it,
Right.
that the feeling of it all the time, like, oh, there's Microsoft auto update again. And it's because I've got Excel installed or whatever, and like I
Mhm.
kind of, it's hard to make it go away and stuff like that, and like that feeling of being kind of controlled or having a lack of control is to me the kind of worst thing about being beholden.
I agree. And another thing that I think some people in my circle may not understand because to us, technology is everything. We really love it. But to the average person, someone who does not care about technology, their computer sits at the same layer as their microwave or their fridge. It's an appliance. It's something that they bought to do a thing and it's set somewhere and they use it. So for some reason, a lot of people they're okay with start menu ads, or they're okay with whatever their shenanigans or operating system is doing. But imagine if your microwave wouldn't start for 2 minutes because it had to play a video ad, or
Yeah.
something was installed in your microwave and now your popcorn isn't as fresh, or you're on your fridge, you're getting ads, or who knows what could happen, right? Obviously, that's just all fictitious. I just made that up, but it
Mm-hmm.
is embarrassing and weird as that sounds. That's literally what we're okay with on our computer. Our computers are not fully working for us. And for me, um, another thing that people don't think about is that internet connections are not always unlimited anymore. Some people have bandwidth caps. How much of your internet has been spent downloading apps and ads that you didn't ask for? And who's paying for that bandwidth? You are. I mean, are they going to separate something that Apple does from your bandwidth allowance with your ISP? No, they don't really have the resources to do that. So we literally have our CPU cycles working for the company to process showing things that we didn't ask for, downloading things on our internet that we didn't ask for, that we're paying for, apps that we didn't get installed. The list just keeps going on. So when you really think about it, sure, ads that are downloaded on your internet connection might probably be 1% or half a percentage point of your monthly bandwidth to be completely fair. But like you said, it's the idea of it. If you didn't ask for it, it's your appliance. I mean, imagine if your microwave started doing something that you didn't ask or it just decided to turn on randomly in the background. Um, Obviously, again, that's just fictitious. I just made that up, but it is kind of the same thing because our computers are not always working for us. But with Linux, we could literally take control back and say, this is our appliance. It's not supposed to be calling home every 5 minutes for God knows what reason. And I think that's really important. To be fair, again, some people don't really mind or they're just habitually clicking through the ads and it's nothing to them. But for a lot of people, it's about the principle. And then for me, I don't want to, like my first point, I don't want to be in a situation where I can't use my computer today because something at the operating system vendor end of things decided that it shouldn't work the same way. Or, um, I mean, worse, what if a program is installed on your computer you didn't ask for, and then your performance tanks? I mean, I haven't heard any stories about that, but it could happen. So when you really put it all together, it's just, I feel like the general public is just way too forgiving when it comes to what we are okay with when it comes to our computer use.
So let's say someone's watching and they're kind of like, okay, you've convinced me that I probably want to do this now, but I'm afraid, which would be sort of probably a really common thing because you'd be worried about, like, I've got everything, at least as troublesome as some of this might be, I've got everything set up. I know where everything is. If I
Mhm.
take my actual computer and I switch it to Linux, am I risking losing stuff?
I would say absolutely in any migration. I mean, even non-operating system things, you're going to run into that. When it comes to video editing, I at one point switched away from Caden Live to DaVinci Resolve because I knew that I would produce better work. But when I did that, my productivity slowed down. It took me a lot longer to create videos as I was learning it. But I knew that the struggle was worth it because at the end of this, I'm going to be a lot better for it, and I absolutely was. When it comes to your computer, it's a little worse. Your operating system, it's worse because that's your entire workflow. That, like you just said, that's where your things are, your apps are, your settings and your files. And sure, you could transfer all those files over to Linux. That's not a problem. There's definitely ways to do that. So you don't have to lose anything. If you do, it's just because you don't have backups. But you still have to learn now, how do you access your files? Where are they? Or for a Windows user, they might ask, where is my C drive? Well, there isn't one actually. That's in the book. But those kinds of questions just naturally come up, and it's perfectly natural. I mean, there is a point where you have to understand that there is a learning curve, but it's less about the struggle right now and more about where do you want to be. And I think that's kind of the more important thing to look at when it comes to any migration. It just, kind of is the way that it is. But Linux does kind of make that a lot easier. And one of the ways that it does this, and I'm surprised that Windows and Mac don't even do this. It has live mode. You could run it from a USB
Right.
without changing your operating system. You could literally run it in live mode and just play with it, practice with it. And when you get tired of it, you could just shut your computer down, take the flash drive out, and then it's back to the way it was before with no changes whatsoever. And I think that's kind of a superpower in a way because, I mean, being able to try an operating system before you buy it, so to speak, we're used to doing that with apps. We can get a free trial of just about anything nowadays. But who's offering a free trial? Well, free, but a free trial of an operating system where you could just have the sandbox to play with it and make sure that it actually works on your computer before you install it. And I think that makes it a lot easier. And sometimes, depending on the distribution, you can actually install apps and copy files over to that flash drive installation too, if you're clever. So, in that sense, you got to get a feel for how everything works before you install it, which definitely makes it a lot easier. Or the other way around, you could look at the apps that are available on Linux ahead of time, just take a look at them. But then you can install those apps on your Windows computer or your Mac right now. You can install LibreOffice, Firefox, Thunderbird. There's just a bunch of these apps that are cross-platform. You'll find things like Steam, Discord, Slack, all the usual contenders. Visual Studio Code even is on there. There's a lot of cross-platform applications. So you can even just stick to your proprietary operating system, but install the Windows or Mac versions of Linux apps and just use those as your productivity apps. And then when you switch over to Linux, you already know the apps at that point. At that point, the only thing left to do is just find out how to launch a program or open a file, but that's something most people can figure out in an hour. So depending on how you go about it, it's not as hard as it could be, but it is a change of workflow. But you think about where you want to be and what the end goal is, and that'll help drive you to get you there.
My little joke when it comes to these launch videos is it goes against my nature to have short conversations, but that's that's the idea for the launch videos. So
Right.
just I guess my last question to you would be if there's one thing we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to talk about to people who are interested in buying the book or who've just bought the book and are getting to know it that you would like to talk about, what would you like to say?
Well, I would say that one of the values too that I tried to make integrated here is that I have a lot of videos at this point. So whenever possible, I try to actually have URLs to videos at the end of chapters. So if someone wants to see it in action. So when I'm talking about desktop environments, yeah, you're reading about it, but do you want to see it? Well, that's fine. You can go to the relevant video section at the end of a chapter, and there's a short URL, very easy to type. You don't have to type a long YouTube URL or anything because I use a URL shortener. So you can get a video version of quite a few of the topics here. And another thing I'll say is that it's very
Mm.
practical. I try to have a practical approach to everything because I've helped a lot of people switch to Linux personally. I don't really talk about this much on the channel because, someone comes to me for help, whether it's a friend or family member, it is what it is. But they all have or many of them have the same problems. And over like the past 20 years, I've been seeing some of the same problems come up. And a lot of books out there, and no judgment to any books because I'm sure they're great, and I've read quite a few that are amazing. But there's it's really hard to talk about this because depending on what desktop environment or Linux distro you're using, it's really hard to give someone some information that's going to apply to whatever they happen to have installed. And I think in this book, I found a way to do it. I always prefer to talk more about the theory or what you're looking for in general to help navigate you there and give you the mindset for how to approach where to find things. That's more applicable to many things. And yes, there's a lot of instruction and things that are specific to one distro or desktop environment. But whenever possible, it tries to paint the overall picture. Like, what's the world look like? What is the environment like that you're in right now? And to talk them through it at their own perspective or as close to it as I can get based on the complaints or problems I've heard other people run into, and just really try to guide them in a way that makes logical sense and meets them where they are and helps guide them in a way that's not rushing them, but is just, using common sense and analogies to help really drive the points home. And I feel really strongly that this book will absolutely help someone move over to Linux. Um, it's been a very long time coming. I've been wanting to write a beginner book for a long time, but I was writing multiple editions of the last book that I published through a publisher. And it's also a new beginning because it's a new beginning when it comes to my writing career, doing it in a self-publishing sense. I'm starting back at the beginning again. I'm still going to write some advanced books, and then the next one will be advanced actually. But I wanted to start with something from a beginner perspective, kind of like a phoenix. My writing career is reborn and it's going to be direct to the people, and it'll be reborn with a brand new beginning that'll help people get onboarded onto Linux. And then future books will carry them even further to the advanced topics if they're interested in that, or they could subscribe to my channel and check out what's happening because there's videos coming out every week.
Well, thanks very much for that really great story about your publishing journey as well as everything else, Jay. And thanks very much for the amazing book, Switching to Linux,
Mhm.
a practical guide for Windows and Mac users. I definitely recommend it to anyone who's convinced by our conversation today that they want to try. This book will guide you through it in a
Thank
way
you.
that's appropriate for you and your situation. So thank you very much, Jay, for taking the time to do this video today.
Appreciate you.